welcome to our Bible Ponder for this week. We're continuing our series looking at Luke and specifically looking at the second part of Luke chapter 6 today. And this is what is sometimes called the Sermon on the Plain. And it's in many ways a companion or mirror image, or maybe even words that come from the same sermon that Jesus gave in the Sermon on the Mount, as recorded in Matthew chapter 5. But this is called the Sermon on the Plain because it says Jesus went and stood on a level place for this. So it could be, if you're wanting to consolidate these stories from here in Matthew 5 as similar speeches at different events, you can easily do that by saying it would make sense for Jesus to give really similar sermons or talks with his teachings in different places at different times to different audiences. That makes total sense. People who do public speaking do that all the time. You could also argue and say that both are collections of sayings of Jesus that he said at different places and different times, and that some of this here in Luke chapter 6 and some of what's in Matthew chapter 5 are drawn from the same source material. Either way, you end up at the same place, which is you have these words here in the Gospel of Luke. What I want to kind of focus on as we read the second half of Luke, and what I want you to maybe zero in on as you listen, is the idea of truth and authenticity in a person, and that what Jesus is often talking about is getting at the heart of an issue. But he's also talking about real life situations and practical things. Jesus is not just talking in the clouds and using really spiritual and ethereal language to talk about ways in which we live our lives that are, somehow mystical. A lot of what he's talking about are real life practical situations that have real life practical consequences. And Luke especially, even more than Matthew, I think draws that out. Matthew, of course, throughout Matthew's entire gospel, will use the phrase kingdom of heaven instead of kingdom of God, which is the more common one in the other gospels. You'll notice right away, you'll start to hear the Beatitudes, or you'll hear bits from Matthew 5, and you'll hear it slightly differently here in Luke. It's very practical. It's very real life. And we have to remember that for Jesus's audience, most of them would have been poor. Most people in the ancient world were poor, but especially Jews living in those lands were poor people. They were subject to famine, to the whims of those who were wealthier than them. They were subject to, again, weather conditions, and all of these things would affect their lives. Things like interest rates and the choices of lenders, and whether or not there were soldiers who were going to, want to pick on you that day. All of those things are real life scenarios for them. They're not somehow just, ethical conundrums or case studies. It's real life. So look out for that, and look out for this way that Jesus gets to the heart of issues, and gets to the heart of who we should be and how we can live without superficiality. So as usual, I will read and kind of offer some comments along the way, but mostly I think I will let a lot of this stand. This is Luke chapter 6, beginning in verse 17. He came down with them and stood on a level place, with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all in the crowd were trying to touch him, for power came out of him and healed all of them. And that is a reference that's pretty similar to what you see happen in a story with the woman with the issue of blood who does reach out and touch Jesus. And indeed, power does come out of him, and she's healed without him giving consent for that. So we can hear that also relayed there. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven. For that is what their ancestors did to the prophets. So you can hear a bit of the Beatitudes in there, but there's also some differences that you hear. For one, it's a bit shorter, quite a bit shorter. But first you start off, blessed are you who are poor. Not blessed are the poor in spirit, which is what Matthew has. And there's kind of two sides to this. In one sense, the idea of being poor, especially in the Aramaic language, which Jesus would have spoken, though this is written in Greek, that idea of poor had become a way of saying that someone also was pious or close to God if someone was poor, because someone who was poor practically in real life had to depend on God. They had nothing else to depend on but God. And so there was this idea then that to be poor meant that you were wholly dependent on God. So we don't have to necessarily go all the way to say Luke is negating what Matthew is saying, where Matthew makes it poor in spirit. He could very well be confirming it and just shortening it to poor, which might have been the way they understood it. But I don't think it's also entirely wrong at all to stick very much in the real life, especially with how the rest of chapter 6 goes. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are you who are hungry now. And again, there's that second difference, not hunger and thirst for righteousness, but blessed are you who are hungry now. This immediate real life hunger, the very rumble in your belly, not some ethereal idea. So I think we are on pretty firm ground to kind of straddle the fence a little bit, say, yeah, poor is this idea of being dependent on God spiritually. But also, I think, in a huge way, blessed are you who are poor. And there's an even better argument for that as we continue reading here, as we move into the woes, because this is not a list of beatitudes, this is actually blessings and woes, which is a common way of constructing certain things that happens a few times in the Old Testament and in other bits of Jewish writing and other things, that you have blessings and woes sort of side by side that mirror each other. And so part of why we will stick with this idea of poor on its own being in many ways economic with maybe a tinge of spiritual side of it. Let's move on to verse 24 and we'll get the woes. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. So again, here in the flip side of the woes are the exact flip of the blessings. Those who are rich, those who are full, and those who are laughing, as opposed to those who are poor, those who are hungry, and those who weep. And so that's also why we can take Luke's poor here rather than poor in spirit to be what he means, economic poverty. And Jesus is not pulling any punches. Woe to you who are rich. Woe to you who are full now. Woe to you who are laughing now. And then he continues, woe to you, and I'll speak well of you. For that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. If what you're telling the people is what they want to hear, of course they're going to love you. Of course they're going to speak well of you. And the prophets that we read about the most, who we bring up again and again, like Elijah especially comes to mind as one of those prophets in the ancient world, but especially all of them, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they did not tell the people what they wanted to hear, and they were reviled, and they were hated, and they were mocked and driven out of society because they weren't popular. Verse 27, but I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not even withhold your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. So in this list, again, it's very practical. We can try and lift this out and make it some kind of spiritual or ethical way of going about life and try and tie it into different scenarios. He's very specific, though. And these are specific things. If someone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. The first strike would have been one meant to harm, meant to cause damage. And the second, a backhand, would have been about honor. And so Jesus's call here to turn the other cheek is also about reclaiming honor and disarming the other person, making them look the aggressor. And the same with taking away your cloak. You would have your tunic and your cloak. And so if someone comes and wants to take your coat, and all you have underneath is your shirt, and you give them that also, then you're naked, and then you're basically exposing their greed. You're exposing what they've wanted from you. And it's a way to go above and beyond, but it also reclaims a bit of the power in that by disarming their greed and their aggression. Then give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Give to everyone who begs from you. So often in Christian circles, we talk about charity or giving, or how do we care for people who have needs in our community. And inevitably someone will bring up the idea of how do we guard against being taken advantage of? Or what if you give it to somebody and they go and do X? And that's often the way it's formulated. Jesus is no nonsense here. Give to everyone who begs from you. Kind of hard to wiggle out from under that, to be honest. Verse 32, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And we'll say this back to verse 31, do to others as you would have them do to you, that kind of golden rule thing. That's not unique to Jesus. That's a pretty common idea in the ancient world. What is very different for Jesus here is the idea of loving your enemies. That was a new thing. That was a unique thing. The idea of treating others well, not new to Jesus, obviously, but that idea of loving your enemies is. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good and lend, expect nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. And again, the idea of lending is a very practical reality, especially for an agrarian society. As farmers, they would have depended on loans in order to do their farming, which is still the case for many farmers today, to receive a big loan in order to carry out your farming work. And then once you have harvested, once you've sold all of your crops, you are then able to repay the loan and then take whatever money you have made on top of that. And that was the same in the ancient world. And there was a practice where, according to some laws in the Old Testament, every 7th year, things had to be given back to their proper owners and all of that. And so to guard against losing out on investments, there were some lenders who wouldn't lend the year before that because they might not receive it back. And there was a lot of fear in that. And so Jesus is getting to the heart of this again, getting to the real down to the bare bones issue of give to people and show grace, show mercy, and give money to people without expecting something in return. You don't have to get something out of it. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. And this image is of almost a jar. You can picture almost like a Kilner jar, and you're putting in grain, and you shake it down, press it down, and shake it together, because you pour it in there, and you can get more in if you shake it down and you press it down, and you can get more. But then it's so much that even when you've shaken it down and pressed it down, more is still pouring out into your lap, almost into, you picture your shirt tails, and you're holding them out like you're a kid collecting shells on the beach, and you've got your shirt tails out, and the grains overflowing from your Kilner jar into your shirt tails. That's the measure that that God offers as a reward for this kind of behavior. For the measure you use will be the measure you get back. He also told them a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher. The purpose of a disciple was to become a teacher in their own right. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but not notice the log in your own eye? How can you say to your neighbor, friend, let me take out the speck in your eye, when you yourself Do not see the log in your own eye. You hypocrite, first take out the log from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. And as far as we can tell, in some ways that's almost like a humorous anecdote from Jesus. This would have been quite a funny image. You can picture this, and if you can picture him telling the story originally, he could have gotten a few laughs there. But his point stands, his hyperbolic point stands, that do not judge others. Do not look at other people and say they should do this or they should do that, or they're not good enough, blah, 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 when you don't know what's going on in your own life. So do not judge, do not condemn. Get to the heart of all of this and be authentic, be real. Do not set yourself up as judge or teacher. Then he goes on, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are not gathered from thorns, and grapes are not picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of the heart produces good, and the evil person out of evil treasure produces evil, for it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them. That one is like a person building a house who dug deeply and laid the foundations on rock. When a flood arose, the river burst against that house but could not shake it because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not act is like a person who builds a house on the ground without a foundation. When the river bursts against it, immediately it fell, and great was the ruin of that house. So we have a couple parables back to back, again with real life situations, real life tie-ins to trees and to house building. Again, they don't have concrete. They're not going to level off a bit and then pour a concrete foundation. They do have to dig. They have to find a good foundation, and sometimes that's even finding bedrock or whatever. But they dig down and find it versus someone who just builds a house on the ground. But these are all about getting to the real core of who we are, laid bare before God, not worth anything more than anybody else, but not in a woe is me, I'm so worthless, I'm a worm kind of way, but in recognizing the worth and humanity of everyone else around us, not to put ourselves up and above everyone else as judge, jury, or executioner, or to say that we are better or greater than anyone else, but to love and to not judge and to not condemn, and to look at the world in this way where it isn't the rich or the full or the laughing who are the ones who are winning, the ones who have God's favor, but it is the poor and the hungry and those who weep. That is where God is. That is the heart of God. And then when we get into these laws and these rules, it's about the heart of these rules. It's not just about following rules. It's not just about what's legal and what's not. It's about the heart of what is good and the heart of what is right. So that is the Sermon on the Plain. Again, a lot of similarities to the Sermon on the Mount, but also a lot of differences. And that then sets us up throughout Luke as he's going in. We've had him as a child, and then the start of his ministry, the calling of the disciples, and then boom, you get that chunk, that kind of really succinct and tight but strong distillation of so much of what Jesus is about, so much of what Jesus' teaching is. And then from here, Luke is going to go on and now tell a few more stories, and you get more of Jesus' teaching. But that solid block then is to serve as this is who Jesus is. This is what he's teaching people. All right, now let's go on the journey with him. Let's go see him heal people, do miracles, talk to more people, tell more parables. But this is to set us up. This is to say, who is Jesus? What did he teach? This right here. And so for that reason, I think it's an incredibly important bit of text for us as Christians and as students of the Bible, students of Jesus, disciples with a lowercase d, if you will. So thanks for watching. If you want to catch up on other Bible Ponder videos, you can check us out on YouTube and Facebook there under Bible Ponder. Also on, if you're listening on the podcast, you can check out all of our previous episodes that way on Spotify or other places that you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us this evening. Have a good night.